morning and welcome back to the free educational webinar series brought to you by WeatherWorks. My name is Michael Prianti, Director of Social Marketing and a lead meteorologist here at WeatherWorks. Today we're joined with lead meteorologist Brad Miller, who you've seen in past webinars, and also a special guest joining us here this month, Kevin Mahone, the Director of Snow and Ice Management at Penn Outdoor Services. We'll be discussing in this webinar the challenges of working outdoors and how to use the forecast to your advantage. And without further ado, Brad, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Great to be a part of our webinar series here at WeatherWorks. Yes, I am meteorologist Brad Miller, and weather impacts us in all different ways, but the challenges it can present are amplified with outdoor work. And now that we're transitioning from winter into spring, although winter is holding on as long as it possibly can this year, but again, from landscaping to hardscaping and even construction, adverse weather can cause countless delays, rescheduled work, damaged material. So really in this month's webinar, we're going to talk with Kevin Mahone of Penn Outdoor Services to see how he overcomes these weather difficulties in the field. And Kevin, welcome, and how are you today?
Hey, Brad, I'm doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on here. And yes, it seems like winter is sticking around just to make sure we didn't forget about him.
Yeah, and give us a little background on your company and where you work there at Penn Outdoor Services.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Director of Snow and Ice Management here at Penn Outdoor Services, and we service southeastern Pennsylvania. So basically the upper Chesapeake all the way up to the Lehigh Valley, Philadelphia Metro. We are commercial landscaping, construction, chemical application, and snow removal company. So we are working outdoors 365 days a year.
All right, well, let's get right into it. And looks like my camera may have been going in and out here, but let's talk about how you transition basically over to the summer or the green season as you come out of winter. I guess it's a very eventual process. It's not like night and day versus, all right, we're going to take everything off now and go right into green season. How late in the spring really do you keep your plows and salters on?
Yeah, exactly. So it's touch and go would be a good way to describe it. What really helps is when you have somebody focusing on snow, and you have somebody focusing on landscaping in the green season, like you're saying. And it's just a lot of communication to go kind of gently into the transition of the seasons. So to answer your question directly, when it comes to plows and salters, well, we're very lucky to have some great mechanics here, and we've invested the money into plows and salters that can kind of easily be pulled out and reinstalled quite quickly. So in the wintertime, when we have everything out in the field, for us, it's strategically bringing things home. Trucks are great because they're mobile. So it's just a matter of getting some fuel in there, getting equipment back in like salters, and getting the plows, on the mounts. And nowadays, the mounting systems on pretty much all the major plows are really easy to take on and take off. So usually, just your plow operator can even handle that on his own. It's not like you need a mechanic. So maybe early in the season, you might try to leave a few salters in. Later, as you get into April, you might need to start pulling those salters out, especially if you're using, stake body dump trucks that you're needing to use a lot of the spring cleanups. And it's really just putting them in a good spot. Don't quite put them up on the upper shelf yet. Leave them to the side and let them sit for a little bit, so you can kind of quickly put them back on. Really, the biggest thing for a commercial snow and landscape company to deal with is really the heavy equipment. So when you have a lot of equipment out in the field, that's staged for the winter. You spend a lot of time getting them set up in the fall, and then you're just kind of in wait to go mode. So you're watching the weather, and you get a storm, you go to work. So now you're transitioning from winter to spring, and it's really, how do you move that equipment? Because it's not
right.
You can't do it really quickly.
Yeah.
Especially talking about some of these wheel loaders. I mean, you need to have a CDL tractor with a low boy to move these things around. So and for a lot of our peers too, and even even the big guys, you're going to rent some equipment too. So that's
Sure.
another big decision to be made. If you're spending money on rentals, monthly rentals usually, because you take them and put them at your sites. How long do you want to keep paying that bill?
Sure.
And then, but then again, like we're looking at today, you could have an April 19th snowstorm.
Yeah.
So it's really, man, it's really tough. So it's just, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more, but it's, it's a symphony of a lot of different decisions, kind of making them at the right time that you can transition to getting to your spring cleanups, doing your mulching jobs, getting crews going, getting construction crews back rolling. And you kind of have to delicately flow from one to the next.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you get these late season storms, and usually they're not that impactful. Now, granted, this last one that we're dealt with a couple of days ago on Monday night into Tuesday, um, that was very inland, very elevation dependent. Thankfully, it wasn't very, impactful for the I-95 corridor and a good footprint of weatherworks and things like that. Although we do, we do have forecasts for some of our inland areas, but there's been instances I'm sure you can remember, even like the metro areas and good parts of New Jersey, Connecticut, getting some April storms, and that's got to be a headache though when again you're transitioning into that spring mode and then you get that big storm that you have to remove snow for. So I mean, can you remember anything off the top of your head?
Yeah. Obviously, those happen. You have those April storms, and really, the best way to assure yourself that you're going to get a good storm is to just take everything back home and put it in the barn,
Yeah,
because that's just the way it goes.
yeah,
Even talking with guys further inland and further north, like we were talking about, even they were starting to pull some stuff out and
right.
get ready for a new season. And you just got to sound the alarm and ring the bell and go to work. For us, in my experience, luckily, if you do things the right way, if you're slow on the return, you can kind of make do with a skeleton crew, so to speak.
Right,
So let's just like one storm we had that came in early April. We had 4 pieces of equipment out of the site. Well, we pulled 3 of them, and then we were able to support with trucks. So that was a way, you kind of put in some contingencies and some safeties. So if when that storm did show up, we at least had a machine that was moving, keeping the
right.
bulk of things open, where a truck could come in and support it. And yeah, we had to move some skid steers around really quick with some trailers, but those things are a lot easier to deal with. So
Sure.
that's why everything needs to come kind of in layers. You close up shop slowly, and you have a plan. So when that storm pops up, you can handle it. Now the good thing about that storm was it's an April storm, so you're going to we got a burst of snow, and it covered over. We were able to open it up, but what the secret is in April snow is it's going to melt off quickly.
Yeah.
Grounds are so warm. You have that April sun angle. So don't tell our clients that it's a little bit easier, but it is. It's definitely a little bit
No,
easier. So
I
nature's
agree.
working with you a little bit to get to the finish line a little bit quicker than it would be in say January.
Yeah, and and that was actually our last webinar last month. It was about late season snowfall, and we kind of joked around. The pattern kind of, it kind of resembles something that happened a few years ago in April, and sure enough, here we got one. But at least again, it was very
What was it,
climo as we
2018 or
call it.
17? Was it 2017 or 18, I believe? We had
Yeah,
that.
there wasn't one. Yeah, I think there was one back then too. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey too. I can remember some Easter snowfalls even in Central Jersey, and this is going way back. But
Yeah.
it definitely happens. So I think we're good now. I think I think we're gonna finally turn the corner. The pattern looks like it's gonna finally at least get zonal, and zonal in April you can't get snow, so it would have to take a lot to really get back to a winter
Uh,
time scenario.
I've heard you say that before, Brad.
I know. No, it's come on. It's late April now. We're talking almost
Yeah.
May. Although it did snow on Mother's Day last 2 years, so who knows?
Yeah.
All
It's
right, well
crazy.
let's move.
What's the record in Central Park? I think is like it's like May the 4th or something.
Yeah,
That wasn't
maybe. I'm sure.
anything
I wouldn't
recorded.
doubt it. Yeah.
It was witnessed. So weather's kind of cool with that, and I know that's kind of what we're talking about today. And you've got to have a little bit of a respect, a little bit of a passion for weather,
Yeah.
um, especially if you're working outdoors. I mean, you just see crazy stuff, and
Well, all of our
you have to
clients, yeah. I
respect
mean,
that.
yeah, all of our clients at WeatherWorks, I mean, they're very rehearsed in the weather. They know how to look at radars and things like that. I mean, they of course, they expect the best out of our forecast too, and then it just goes hand in hand. And the hardest type questions we get is, why is this app saying this, and why is the TV saying this, and you guys are saying this. So that's a lot of times what we fight in our forecast. But we stand by our forecast, and
Yeah. Well, there's a big difference between modelology and meteorology,
exactly.
and anyone can put together a a computer system or an algorithm that takes all the different
Sure.
forecasts, weighs them in some way, and then just adjusts every 15 minutes. And there you go.
Yeah, it's the human
It's a
touch
little bit,
that yeah, the
yeah, it's
human
a little
touch
bit of
that
an
we
art.
have. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and there's a lot of regional guys too. I spent some time in Western North Carolina. There were some local firefighters that just were passionate about the weather,
Yeah.
and they loved it, and they got a lot of training. And I tell you, they were dead on the money with every storm, way better than anyone regional or
Wow.
especially the
Well,
national.
your area, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you kind of have to, it goes back to what we just started talking about, which is you have to be passionate about it. It's nature. You have to respect it and have some passion for it to really try to understand and make good decisions based on,
Right.
your experiences.
And even like we have the consultation service at WeatherWorks, when they call in for forecasts, and a lot of times if it's like marginal situations, and I'll say like colder areas, elevated areas, and I'll say to whoever the client is I'm talking to, you know your area better than I do. You work out there every single day. You know the nooks and crannies just like anything else. I don't live
Yeah.
there, I don't work there, so but I just kind of guide them the proper way, I think. And in the marginal situations, if it's gonna be a widespread snowfall, then everyone gets it. But there's certain situations where it's going to come down to localize and very knowing the area better than anyone else. So all right, well, let's move on to that sensitive green season. What are the most sensitive weather, I guess, projects you do when it comes to, like, even now we get in the rain and thunderstorm season and things like that? Like, what can't you do and what can you do on certain days?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Brad, really the worst, effect that weather has on, which section of our business, I guess, is maintenance.
Hmm.
That's definitely the hardest hit when you start talking about these storms and you have a lot of this energy coming, and it's like you get these patterns and you get this, these bursts of rain that knock out a full day sometimes, or
Yeah.
they just so it's the maintenance teams that are great, are affected the worst. They're
Right.
greatly affected by this, because it comes down to scheduling. When you're a large company, a medium company, even a small company, just that's intent on growing, you've got to get focused, and you've got to plan, you've got to schedule. And it's no different. For us, we have to schedule out our crews. It's an equation. You know exactly how many square feet you can mow or how many acres you can mow per hour. Um, you know, geographic footprint. How much you can get done in a day, how many crews you're going to need to handle your portfolio, and then you know your contracts. Are we on a weekly mow? Are we on a
Right.
on a 4-inch trigger, whatever it is, when the grass gets to a certain height, where you just have to be on the ball. So, based on the contract and your client and your zone, how much you can get done in a day. And then you're going to go ahead and do the logistics on putting those routes together. And then you're going to plan out your next 2 weeks and 3 weeks. Now, all of a sudden, you have a rain day. Then a couple of days later, you get another one. And then you have a decent storm that is, knocking down branches and trees and messing up plants, where you need to spend a half a day checking sites for your high end portfolio that needs attention after storms.
And
So now
cleanup,
you've got
right.
to schedule that in. Yeah, cleanups, storm cleanups. Now you've got to schedule that in, and then also you have to make up for the days that were lost. And
Right.
then, by the way, because it rained so much last week that it screwed up 2 of your days, the
The
grass is up
grass
there
is
on the
growing.
grass.
Yeah.
So now everything for the next 3 weeks, you're like, trying to play catch up. So
Right.
I will say this: I definitely respect what our maintenance and production crews, those managers, those scheduling guys. I mean, they could all get a job at FedEx, UPS, Amazon, any of those places, easy, because they're thinking on their feet, and they're constantly adjusting schedules to making sure we're hitting the mark week in and week out. So that's definitely probably the part of our business that has the greatest influence from
Yeah, I didn't
bad
even
weather.
think about that. Yeah, the maintenance of all the. I guess some rainy days are good to a point, maybe, because you can get a lot of indoor stuff and maintenance done. Maybe on. I mean, how does that correlate? I mean, you probably need some time to get mowers and certain, equipment fixed. I mean, do you actually hope for an off day per se, where you don't have to do stuff outside and maybe catch up on the maintenance side? Does that ever happen?
No, not really. I mean,
No.
our maintenance team, I'm sorry, our mechanics, those guys in there, they have a pretty strict schedule too. So they're pulling stuff off of crews in a rotation. So
Right.
really, they know what they're doing, and those lucky dogs, those guys are indoors in the shop and nice 5 bay garage. So that really isn't affected as much. The construction crews too, they can adjust things. You can do an install in some light rain. You can do a lot of different work. You focus on different parts of the project. It's really those maintenance guys that have the biggest difficulty. And one of the ways that we kind of address that is that we try to schedule our week on a 4-day week.
Okay.
4 10-hour days. So that's the game plan. When we say like, hey, we're full. It's because we've maxed out our maintenance crews on that kind of 4-day schedule. So that leaves us a Friday to do the things that you're talking about. If we do need to rotate something through, or
Right.
if we need to get caught up, or really, anyone who works in this business longer than one season, you're going to know that there's really no quiet days. There's no down days.
Right, because everything's
There's
growing
always something.
constantly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you get these weird requests. You have that one spring cleanup that didn't come till midsummer. Like, what were we doing waiting for months? But then you get that weird request, or you have some tree work, or you have whatever. Those requests come in, and it's all about fitting them into the schedule, because it seems like those pop up constantly. And then your existing clients, they're asking for new stuff. They want to change out their gardens. They have new ideas. You got to be able to fit those into the schedule. So that's what we do, is that we kind of open up that Friday to be flexible. And then Saturday for us is not mandatory, but that's another option for
Right.
certain crews. So there's ways to get around it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that the calls we get in the morning, even in the summertime versus the wintertime, obviously everyone's doing outdoor work. I think that the biggest, I guess the biggest volume of calls is uh, centered around roofing and paving. I don't know how much of that
For
you
sure.
guys do, but I mean, it seems like it's almost all, especially, I mean, a lot of the calls we get in the summertime.
Yeah.
Can I do this today? Or what's the chance of rain? And paving, I guess, is very sensitive, obviously, and roofing to a point is too. I mean, you don't want a thunderstorm while you're pulling someone's roof off. But I mean, talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for sure, you hit the two most important ones. Paving, temperature-wise, too. You probably get those questions in the early part of the season, or even in the
Right.
late part of the season. What's going to be our average temperature, overnight temperature next week? For us, concrete would be a big part of what's affected by the weather, because your mix can go it can go sideways really quick if you have a rainy day. And then the other part that is affected that we haven't touched upon is our chemical applications, our turf management teams. You could use surfactant in your batch, but that's really only going to help you with like a nice little evening straight thunder shower. If it's going to downpour, you don't want to be spraying, part
Sure.
of your program the day before it downpours. You're spending a lot of money to make sure that batch is exactly the way you want it, and the material is very expensive. The last thing you want to do
Sure.
is waste it, because at the end of the day, your client's not going to care. They're going to want to see you back spraying for that broadleaf if they're finding broadleaf. So paving, uh, roofing, those guys are probably trying to call you every morning. Temperatures
And early too,
and
and very
storms.
early, 4:30, 5 a.m. I mean, they're ready to
Yeah,
go. They want to know what's.
your landscapers are probably calling in to figure out like, hey, am I going to have to scrap this whole day, or
Right.
when is this going to blow through, or when is it going to start? Can I adjust my schedule? tomorrow morning and bring the guys in at 5.
We'll get calls the previous night about that when there's an incoming
Yeah,
storm. Can I
you can
still
tell
get
your
out there
crews in the
after
morning.
9 o'clock? It's very important too. It's a big difference from wintertime because winter you're not doing that much outdoor work. You're just waiting for the snow to end when you can treat and things like that. Summertime, you have a big, like you said, you have 10-hour days. You have a lot of daylight. So just because it's raining at 8 a.m. doesn't mean you can't work at 11. So that's like probably what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you can adjust your day. Again, these guys are great at scheduling. And if you're working outdoors, you have to be flexible. So you can start your day at 10, or you can start your day at 5. But you just what we need from you guys is just pretty accurate ballparks.
Right.
Is this thing going to be lingering all day, or is it going to clear out? And that's really the most important things. And then temperature too. I know we're not really into that yet. Briefly touched upon it, but temperature is very important. In the wintertime, obviously, when we have a storm that comes through and all of a sudden we're dropping down to the single digits, that affects my whole strategy.
Sure.
In the summertime, it's no different. If we're going to have days, where those 3 p.m. highs are going to be 95.
Yeah, the heat index is in the 90s, pushing 100. Yeah,
We need to adjust to that. We need to dance with Mother Nature, and we need to make sure
that.
we're, we need to flow. We need to work with her the best that we can, and adjust our schedule. So I remember doing, years back, we were doing a lot of install jobs on irrigation, and it was like 105. It was miserable. It was miserable out, and we're digging these trenches and we're doing this install, and it was just getting so bad that we legit would start our day around 4:35 a.m. First day, when the light was just coming up, we would work until it was just unbearable, and we would take a siesta. And there's a reason why that's around. So we would stop for lunch. We would stop. We would break. We could even go home for an hour or two, and then we would come back and we started working again at like 4 o'clock, and we'd work till dark because it was dark till 9. So we were able to work on this job by just adjusting what we had to do. And again, it's not forcing our will on the day. It's just working with the day to be as productive as possible.
All right. Well, we're along those lines. Like, where's your balance between some morning light rain or some drizzle? Can we still mow in this up? What's the threshold for where you can't spray certain things with the wind? We're talking about like not a sunny day and it's not a rainy day where you're losing the whole day. Like in between, like what certain projects can you do, what you can't do with certain light to moderate events, and then of course the wind too can also play a factor.
Yeah, wind is huge, and we haven't really addressed that too much. And the biggest department that's affected by wind probably again is turf management.
Right.
If we're looking for the perfect days, it's 70 degrees. There's not a lot of dew or moisture in the morning necessarily, and not a lot of wind. It's a perfect day. Pretty much for everybody, but especially for landscaping companies, and the wind, also causes the biggest damage, the most damage. So we're not really worried if you're gonna have a little bit of rain coming through. You can keep moving,
right.
Unless it's going to be a serious downpour where the ground's going to be sponge overflowing with water, where you're going to be, turning in the turf and you're going to be
ruining it.
Ruining it, and then clogging mowers with wet grass.
Sure.
If we're just talking about a nice light drizzle, we're cranking through that. We're working through that. Most guys are. No one's taking a day off for that, and that's not really going to affect anything, So to stay on the first part with the wind, if it's going to be a crazy windy day, that's going to knock out a little bit of work. But when it comes to rain, it's going to have to be like a 90 to 100% chance of rain the next day for the duration of the day for us to actually say like, hey, we're not going out today. We're just going to be doing yard work today. We're going to be doing whatever. Or, sometimes you just have to call it. But it's going to have to be a high percentage for at least half a day.
Yeah.
That we know that we're not going to try to either start them late, start them early, chase it. Worst case, you end up burning some fuel, which I know is high right now. But, if you send the guys out because there's a nifty chance, you can kind of, let's just say you get 40% of what you want to get done that morning done. But still 40% now I don't have to reschedule for the rest of the week. The only thing I lost was not really. You don't really lose that much fuel because that truck got to come home eventually anyway. There's some production that you lose, but that 40% is better than zero because now I only have to reschedule 60% instead of
Right.
100%. So it really has to be a slammer of a day
Right.
to cancel, so to speak, the
Yeah,
day's
that's the
work.
one thing a lot of folks don't realize. It's a long day. We just talked about that. The daylight time is long. I mean, 5 a.m. to, like you said, even 9 o'clock at night, you can still probably get some stuff done if you have to, certain projects maybe. But I would imagine, it's a full day, and the forecasts are just as important this summer as they are in the winter. I mean, one's it's just completely the opposite. But it's trying to get more work done versus where you're trying to remove snow and things like that. So, which is a
Yeah,
24-hour process anyway. I guess in the summer at least you can't do too much at night. Although I guess there are some paving jobs at night. A lot of folks, we get a lot of calls actually from New England. They do a lot of paving jobs at night. One,
it's
probably because
cooler.
of the heat, and two, less traffic out there, and especially if you're like doing roads and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. No, the biggest thing um, is going to be, when we talk about working in the evening, maintenance. You can only mow somebody's grass, someone's yard
Right.
until a certain time of the day,
The
and they
neighbors
just don't
get
want to
mad.
see you. Exactly. So yeah, HOAs, POAs. If you do residential, yeah, there is a little bit of a gap, but yeah, you can kind of move and dance a little bit for sure.
So, is there any memorable summer weather events that kind of stick in your mind, whether it's a bad storm or just a flooding, or I mean, anything? I'm sure you've lost a lot of days just because of the weather in the summer, even. But anything that pops in your head, or even like, well, I don't want to talk about Sandy and things like that. That's more hurricanes. But anything that like you can think of right now?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's been a few years since my main focus has been landscaping. Uh, but as a company, we do struggle with weather days. Um, Most notably, we had a job. It was an install job that was not too long ago, where we were installing a lot of trees, a lot of plants. It was a new build, and we had hurricane force winds that came in with the
Oh my
storm.
gosh.
So it really did. Again, it was wind that did the most of the damage. So wind came through and I mean, just tore up most of what we had, and that was probably the most frustrating for us and the client, because rescheduling to do all that work again, and it was completely done just a couple, like 48 hours before, and all those trees came down.
Aye.
So the client ended up having to cover a lot of that too. So that was a notable storm that was just frustrating for everybody, and for the client, for us, and for our guys too, having to go and redo work. So, but that was wind. Wind was the major factor on
Yeah.
that
Yeah, it seems like more and more there's been so much more focus on flooding lately. I mean, even last year with Ida, and it's just a horrible, horrible thing that happened last summer. Ida was one of those storms. Believe it or not, it was such a strong hurricane. Unfortunately, there were fatalities along the Gulf Coast, but there were more fatalities in New Jersey and the metro area from the urban flooding, and that's like it's almost like it's something that it's unheard of these days because of the warnings that we put out, and it's just unfortunate what happened last summer when you have a landfall in category, I think, 4 hurricane, and you lose more lives 2 days later in New Jersey from
Well,
the
it's a
flooding itself.
post-tropical depression. Yeah,
Right.
it's
And
crazy.
it was just, yeah.
And
So
I grew up in Pequannock Township, and we were in the valley. So yeah, definitely aware of keeping your eye on flooding, and it
yeah.
affects regions, really, and it's part of your portfolio. Like you said, you got to know your areas,
Yep.
and flooding causes lots of problems. You can lose a whole bed of mulch. You could lose
Yeah,
a whole
I can imagine. Yeah,
application.
just from a
Um,
rainstorm.
yeah, I mean, you have a lot of turf that will be damaged, and all of a sudden now you've got a lot of fungus growing in
Right.
the
Yeah, I think
summertime,
about
the
that.
stress and the heat of the summer. But the most important thing, like you mentioned, is just the effect that weather can have on a neighborhood, on a community, that you're a part of as a company, as
Yeah.
individuals. And you were talking about this the storm last year. We have guys here on our team that were personally affected, neighborhood wise, flooding in their houses. And that brings in another element, whether you're a small company or a large company. This is your community, and it affects you. You have guys that are at home dealing with flooded
I was gonna say,
basements, or
not only do you work in there, you live there with your
you
families,
live
and,
there.
and you're dealing with your own personal issues at the same time you're, taking care of others.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course, we're going to send guys over there to help clear out that basement, or fix that problem.
Sure.
But it all gets thrown on top of the everyday problems, which is the scheduling and trying to get caught up, and then dealing with the new problems. So that's why drainage is so important. I remember when I had, kind of was doing my own company. Um, when I was working, I had a couple of companies. I would always recommend to my clients that they would improve and install drainages, whether you're doing a new build, or you're just kind of doing a new landscape at your house, your existing house.
Hmm.
Water control is very important. So anytime you can put in even a dry ditch, a dry creek, you're helping. It goes back to what we're talking about, dancing with Mother Nature.
Hmm.
You have to make sure that you give that water a place to go. You prep for the bad days, and obviously, that being a snow guy, that's all I think about all year round is those
Right.
bad days during the year. But you have to think about that on the land and the green side of things. So I know that's a major focus for our internal architect. We have our construction team, and we do a lot of our own designs. And he's always harping on that, making sure we have good water management. Uh, that way, you have a downpour of heavy rain for a day. You give that rain somewhere to go, and the next day you're drying out, and you're not having so much
Sure.
difficulties. So it's kind of like in this, when you're building a parking lot, put some drop curbs, so you have a place to put that snow. It couldn't hurt to have a snow guy come and give you his consultant opinion on how to design your parking lot, pitches
Hmm.
away from the building, not towards the building. Drainage, even for snow, is very important because of melting. Um, you know, you have snow fences, you have drop curbs, like I said. But in the summertime, you should also be doing that with your clients as well, where you're recommending, hey, we need to put in a catch basin here. We need to shore up this part or section of the property, because when we do have that really bad rain in the spring, this is the damage that it could cause. When you're doing even some localized, you're just doing the neighbor down the street. Make sure that when you install those new beds, that you're making sure you get a good sub aggregate down, and a good
Hmm.
base, and a catch basin nearby, or a French drain that can move that water somewhere, because it's going to cause damage eventually, and it also could kill a lot of the installs you're doing. You have plants sitting in water; they're going to rot out and die. So water management is very important.
I was gonna say
And
water
having
seems to be everyone I've talked to, like even on that side of things, is too much water is always worse than not enough water because you can take care of the not enough water most of the time.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. And it's thinking ahead, and it's prep work, and it's working with nature. Whether you're lining up and you're designing um, an install job, or just you gotta figure out what nature's gonna want to do and work with it.
Right. All right. Well, let's shift gears for our final question here. Obviously, we're slowly, if you will, coming out of this pandemic, and just something that's no one will ever forget in their lifetime. But it's been now over 2 years, but it seems like things are finally starting to turn for the good. How is your company, or how are you doing as a company now? Is everyone kind of back? I mean, was there a point where it was really bad for you guys? You know,
Yeah, I mean, the worst part was probably right at the beginning, because there's a lot of unknown.
sure.
That was probably the worst part across our entire industry. Um, you have the unknown. No one knew what to do. Property managers didn't know how they should spend. Everyone's wanting to push pause, and then now companies are trying to adjust to that. We have to learn to wipe down our steering wheels, and make sure everyone's wearing a mask,
Right.
out there in the hot sun. Point is, we learn, we adapt, we
Sure.
overcome, right?
Yeah, we didn't know,
Every
2
last
years, 2 summers ago, how bad it was going to be or what was happening.
Yeah,
still.
so really
Yeah,
the unknown over the last year or so, 2 years, you can make an argument for the industry that people were more focused on home. They were working from home, they're living at home more. So HOAs were looking to invest a little bit more. A lot of manufacturing commercial centers were, they're still trying to go as fast as they can. So you're getting a lot of buildings that are looking to invest in their property. Even Class A is starting to bounce back. A lot of these office buildings are
right.
starting to be repurposed, and people are coming back to work. So that's all wonderful news, like you said. The unknown was probably the worst part, and then since then, it's been pretty much go as fast as you can to catch up. So we've been
Sure.
hiring a whole lot, really just the recruiting full time, and we've been very blessed to have a lot of new guys start this year,
Sure.
to be able to keep up with that growth, and and I'll also provide that level of service that your customers are expecting and your new customers are wanting. Um, so yeah, I guess really there was a pause, a stutter step, but for us it's been pretty quickly accelerating for the last year or so. Um,
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing that's affecting the industry is material costs and labor. In a way, you really have to make sure you have good quality guys. You're paying a very good wage, and you're training and investing in your team, so they're not bouncing around or leaving you within a month
Right.
for another dollar somewhere else. So it's
Yeah.
really it's an opportunity to be um, effective and just make sure that you're doing the right thing for your clients and your customers and your employees and your crews.
I was gonna say, and at the height of this whole COVID thing, the grass kept growing, the snow kept falling. So, I mean,
Yeah,
granted, like you said, there was less traffic probably and less maybe routine maintenance on some parking lots and things like that. But, you still had to do your job on the outside door end or on the outdoor end, and it's just, you of all, you folks outside doing that stuff. I mean, more power to you because you had to deal with it more so than people just having to be able to work at home and do their thing. But
yeah, exactly. You can't be remote when you're going to
right.
properties and mowing grass and doing a physical job. You can't do that for sure. I think that to answer your question directly, especially from my point of view as the director of snow and ice management, the biggest effect that the COVID pandemic had was probably on office buildings. So that's one thing that I can share, and I know my peers have dealt with. Where let's just say you landed a 20 building campus, all Class A office in 2018-19, right? This is great. It's wonderful. It's a big, variable, valuable account. You're going to need, 4 loaders and 5 trucks and 6 skids, whatever, all this great equipment. And you're going to buy that, invest in that, and then you're going to train up and educate your operators so they can know how to provide, good service. You're going to spend a lot of money, thousands of dollars getting all this equipment to these sites, getting set up, doing your prep, all, the whole nine. And then in the middle of the snow season, you get a phone call that says, well, half the buildings aren't really being used today, so we don't want to plow them, and we just want half the lot done,
Uh,
and just and so really, to be honest with you, that was the biggest frustration. And one of the
hmm,
things that I noticed was people kind of pulling back and being more reserved on properties like that were in full use, and they really just had a hard time justifying, 100% of the job being done.
right.
And
And you can't blame them. I mean, I understand. It's like half and half. I mean, they have their own money they're trying to save too because they don't have, the probably the amount of revenue coming in they would have in a normal situation.
I absolutely, I totally get it. With a
Yeah.
hospital, there's no arguing. You just need it done.
Well,
It doesn't matter
yeah,
if it's
hospitals.
a pandemic or anything. These high-profile accounts. Um, I guess the only thing, since we're on the subject, would be to make sure it's not necessarily like mowing. You can let a few fields go, so you can deal with that. The biggest thing with snow and ice is a company's insurance is
Mm,
covering 100% of that property,
right.
uh, and I'm going to be liable for all the service being done on that property.
Yeah. See, there's a lot
Now
of
you're
things
saying
that
that
I don't even think of.
That's probably that was the most difficult, and that's the most dangerous, really,
Yeah, no, I could
for
imagine.
companies out there, is to say, okay, well, I understand, they only want half the job, but they don't want anything today. There's half an inch of ice, but it's, they don't want anything. If somebody were to come on the property, slip, fall, you
And
could lose
it's,
your business.
I hear you.
So that
Wow.
was really, I think that was the one thing that stood out to me as the thing that affected our industry the greatest during the pandemic, was just people being reserved, and then some people continuing to be reserved based on financial decisions they had to make because people were working from home or what have you.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole nother ball of yarn there. I mean, that's I mean, we have our forensics department, and I can't speak for them, but I know they've stayed busy through the pandemic also here at WeatherWorks. So um, it's just amazing. At least we're finally coming out of this. Like I said, that hopefully this we've turned the corner, and we're looking forward to a good summer here and
Yeah,
a few days on the
absolutely.
golf course with you.
Yeah, exactly. It's that time. If you could stop the snow, I'd appreciate it.
I know. Like
These
I said, hopefully this is it. But hey, Kevin, thank you so very much for joining us today in this webinar. And anything you'd like to add here at the end?
I mean, I guess the only thing I want to add is, own a lot of different types of jackets and boots and shoes.
Yeah.
That's really, I mean, that's the best advice I could give, because you can roll with the punches, but you just have to be prepared for them. Have plans and have backup plans.
Yeah.
Whether it's snow or it's green, it's growing season, you just have to work with nature and with the weather, and be prepared for the unexpected.
Yeah. No, I like the quote I take out of this whole webinar is that you got to dance with Mother Nature. I love that.
That's it.
That's true. Whether it
Remember,
doesn't matter
and
what season
remember,
it is.
just remember that she's always leading.
I agree. Yeah, I know. She always has the final word. But hey, again, thank you so very much. And, join us here at our next webinar. But for this one, we're pretty much done. Mike Priante, we're going to bring him back on, and he'll say the last few words. And again, thank you so very much, Kevin. And we've enjoyed this time. Mike?
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah, thanks guys for this amazing presentation. Thanks Kevin for joining us here for this month's webinar, and of course for everyone out there who's watching. We thank you for joining here, and we wish you all the best. And of course, to remember, we have a free webinar every single month, or at least every other month. So make sure you check back, and we'll see you then.